Zoom needs to work on that. Okay, everyone, welcome to part 2 of the Women Entrepreneurs Roundtable. Thanks for joining me. I'm Stefanie Marrone, and I'm here with 9 other amazing entrepreneurs, and we're going to get into a great discussion today. So I want to thank everyone for joining, even though it's the middle of the summer. You never know what kind of attendance you'll get, but if you registered, you will get also a replay of this, and I'll also post it on YouTube. So thanks everyone again for joining. I have a couple of slides that I'm going to share. So let me go into, hang on, full screen, share my screen. Okay, tell me if you guys can see this. Oops.
Yes.
Yes, you guys can. Okay, so let me go to slideshow. Okay, you guys can see this? Okay, here's everybody. Here are speakers. We've got Shari and Sherine. Hopefully I did this again, alphabetical order. So bad late at night doing this. Charlyne and Jen and Laura and Katie and me and Deb and Olivia. Okay, so I called us the women entrepreneurs just a minute ago, and then I saw this article and it said that we shouldn't be referring to ourselves as women entrepreneurs and we should start referring to ourselves as just leaders. So I wanted to know if you guys are offended by me calling us women entrepreneurs. Should I just be saying we're entrepreneurs?
I think just entrepreneurs.
Entrepreneurs, yeah.
Yeah, okay.
Especially in the context of this series that you're doing that's about women starting businesses, I think entrepreneurs makes a lot of sense. When you know, out in the world, maybe you could take a different position on it. But for this, I think that makes sense.
Okay. And I thought that was interesting. So I'm going to start saying just we're entrepreneurs and not have a qualifier attached to it. I also thought this figure about less than 5% of CEO positions in the US and Europe are held by women. So there are a lot of women going to start their own business, and that whole glass ceiling idea then becomes women just starting their own businesses, which I found interesting. And I wanted to ask you guys if you felt like instead of working for a company and being at the top, if part of the reason why you started your own businesses was that you felt like you weren't going to do that for a company or you didn't want to, so you just said, I'm going to start my own business and be my own boss. Was that the case for anyone here?
Yes, pretty much for me.
Yes.
I just realized there were lots of limitations, and I had a boss say something to me and I said, you know what? No one will ever speak to me like that again. I'm going to do this myself. Yeah.
Yeah, I had a similar thing. I kept butting heads with my bosses and I was wondering like what was going on there. And I realized I needed to be the boss. And even when I was, even though I was having was butting heads with the managing partner, just I wanted to be my own boss at a certain point. That's not to say that I can't work for someone else, but I certainly like working for myself. Have you guys found it easier to work for men or women, or is there a difference for you or no difference?
I have found a difference, and I know this isn't the same across the board. It may be, I'm a little biased because my last company was all men, but I find it easier to work with women. I've had better experiences working with women. Many of my clients are women. I really happen to like working with women. Could it be a coincidence? Do we not have a good sample size? Putting my social psychology hat, that's possible. But kind of back to your other question, Stefanie, I realized I was working with all men. I was smarter. I was bringing in more business. I was doing better things, but I was making them money. And I wanted to make myself that money. So it was a great motivator. I think they had more confidence than me at the time, but I got my confidence on and then just started going for it. And I'm so happy that I did.
That's great. Anyone else, like male, female?
I worked in a ad agency. So throughout my career, I did mostly design agencies, and I did go and work for an ad agency that was pretty male dominated. A lot of the work that we did was sports marketing. So, and what I was seeing a lot of times was a lot of my ideas, folks would latch onto it and the credit would go elsewhere. It's almost as if sometimes men can't hear you. And I did go to a conference for women one time, and they said, actually, sometimes the pitch of our voice, to try to keep your voice lower, because men oftentimes cannot hear you. For some reason, they tune higher level of voices out. Anyways, I thought that was interesting. But what I saw all the time was, I was staying there doing the work, but never invited to go out for beers with the guys, never asked to go to the sports events, even though I was doing the marketing for it, because they just assumed I wouldn't be interested in it. So that's when I said, I can't, I have to find a space where people can recognize and see me, because it was too much of a battle to try to battle that kind of social atmosphere.
Yeah, and that's the whole thing with that old boys club, which can sometimes make it hard for women.
And I agree. And I think most of the men, the creative men, it was a subconscious thing. They weren't being mean, and they weren't trying to, it just sort of was a norm. It was such a norm that it was hard to fight. So,
And Charlyne, I'm glad you mentioned that, because I did a video on that exact thing. It was about Margaret Thatcher and how, as the first leader of a first female leader of an industrialized nation, how she had to lower her voice.
yeah,
She had that commanding presence. Yeah, absolutely.
I think a lot of it is talking slower and lower for some reason, just to be heard.
And, it's funny that you say that. So I had a boss who said to me, a woman, to not end your sentences with a question. A lot of women do that. And this was to me and another colleague. So she said we would be high pitched at the end, and that men don't do that. And it was interesting because I hadn't realized that I was doing that. And when I see other women do it, I try to correct them, or I point it out, because it does show that you're not as confident, or maybe what you're saying. It's inflections of speech sometimes can also just affect our executive presence, and it's things that you don't realize that you're doing. I do it in emails too. The way I speak in my emails, sometimes I'm asking, I'm like, please and okay and thanks. And I can be like a little too nice, or then the opposite. I can be a little too direct, which I'm gonna get into the whole direct and dominating and all that kind of stuff. But, the inflections of speech is interesting. And Fabi, I'm interested about that whole men tune you out. Is that a thing? They have a thing against they can't hear certain octaves of voices.
I found it really, I did find it really interesting when I went to business school, and I would be in a class of men, and I would say the answer or whatever the idea was, and the professor would not hear me. I mean, I would say it loud and clear. And I remember there was a fellow student next to me repeated what I said, and he just said exactly, pointed at him exactly. And he, to his credit, said, well, Charlyne just said the same thing. So, there was sort of that recognition, but I was floored that he didn't hear me, but heard him right next to me. So I thought that was an interesting thing.
Yeah.
And it's interesting. There was a gentleman he transgender woman, pardon me. And I can't remember the book, but he said one of the things he didn't realize and he wasn't used to was being talked over. Once he became a woman, he said, I was not used to that as a man.
Yeah.
My idea is not to be considered and for people to talk over me. So it's a reality.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I just did a Google search about, is it true that men cannot hear high-pitched voices? And what I see is that there's an element of hearing loss, but it has nothing to do with being a man. I think men many times don't hear us because they don't want to. How many times do you ask your husband to take the garbage out? He doesn't hear you. I mean, I don't know that I want to put all of that on that. And I do think it's ridiculous that you have to change the pitch of your voice.
I do too.
Be heard. That's crazy.
I could never imagine doing that. That's just such a hard fucking no for me.
No.
Right.
Yeah, or change, who you are. I mean, it was something we talked about in the wardrobe program, where a number of us have been told when we worked at law firms to tone down our clothing or our looks or whatever it was, or to wear gray suits. Listen, I can wear a gray suit every single day, but I still will be me. I will still have sunshine. I will still be colorful. I will still be, assertive. So it's not about the dress. It's about who you are. So, you know, that's an interesting thing. So you can tone down my voice, but you certainly aren't going to tone down who I am as a person, and you can tone down my clothing.
And if
So
you
that
change
is-
the register of your voice, will that make them hear you? I don't know. That's a
I
good
mean, I
test.
think, you know, and to get to your point, Laura, I think that there are some women bosses, or women in general, who also probably find a high-pitched voice very hard to hear, or a certain voice that annoys them, or something about you, and then they'll pick on that. You know, it's not a gender thing, maybe necessarily. It has to do with just a style thing, right? Or whatever it may be.
I think that a lot of it, from a social psychology perspective, because this is what I do, trial consulting, I think a lot of it is a conditioning. And I have had, I remember, I call it the Mitt Romney problem. I made up my own phrase for it. A guy at work during the 2012 election said, now Mitt Romney, he looks presidential. Okay, why does he look presidential? He looks presidential because every other president, we have been conditioned, looks like a white male, just like we are conditioned to hear in corporate America, all of the top people have a certain pitch to their voice. They all dress a certain way. So we're really conditioned. And if you've looked at studies done in corporate America, just about like some subtle biases, offices are colder because men have higher body temperature. So whether it's voice, whether it's temperature, whether it's Mitt Romney looking presidential, we are conditioned for people to look a certain way, behave a certain way. And it's very systemic. It's very ingrained. And these are hard biases to get over. So whether it's the pitch of your voice or how you dress, these are ingrained biases that men and women have and bring to the workplace.
Yeah, and you know, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, when I was a theater student in college, we learned about voice and voice modulating your voice in different settings, and how just, you know, how you can have a great amount of nuance to a change in your voice, and use spacing and timing to emphasize a point as opposed to raising your voice, you know, get quieter as opposed to getting louder to actually to have the emphasis of a point. But what we ultimately learned is it's actually really about control, and it's really about breathing. And oftentimes, if you are using your diaphragm in a way that you're supposed to, that we're all supposed to, whether it's male or female, and you're breathing correctly, your voice naturally modulates down. So it's, I think a lot of it is the higher pitched voices and faster breaths and things like that, I think get confused for nervousness or something else, but really it's just a lack of, you know, sort of that controlled breathing that ultimately is going to relax everything, so your voice is in its natural, sort of perfect natural state.
I love that. That's great. So we all need to breathe more.
Yeah,
We need to breathe. We need to breathe from our diaphragms for sure.
I think we can get excited. I think we can get nervous about wanting to get a point across, or feeling like we don't have a lot of time, or we're going to lose a train of thought, or maybe we're going to lose the forum. So maybe that's also, it's nervousness. It's you know, a lot of different things. I mean, I think that's where excitement, I think it can come from a lot of different places. I certainly wish I was more measured in maybe my delivery at times when it comes to those things. I did hear, you know, again, to go on that Adam Grant thing, I've got this up here. I was talking to the women on the panel today about this thing. This whole assertiveness versus aggressive, and the word dominant, right? So this is, you know, Adam Grant, I'm a huge fan of his writing. He works at University of Pennsylvania. He's an organizational psychologist. He usually has amazing insights. He's the guy who came up with the idea of languishing versus thriving, which a lot of people have taken to heart, and the whole idea that, like, you know, it's okay to call it, you know, where a lot of us are feeling sad, and it's okay to have a mental health day. here's what I don't like about this, right? So it's a post on the left. Being assertive, he's equating with, it's the last line where it says, it's 2021, when will we stop punishing dominant women for violating outdated gender types? My issue is with the word dominant, sorry. I don't like, it seems like it's a systemic stereotype that he has, and as a white male, or as a male in general, I think that's ingrained in him. And I would say that, as a woman who's been in the legal profession, a very male dominated field for so long, where women have really had to carve out our paths, it bothered me. Oh, wow. Someone just posted in the chat that he eliminated that word when he posted the same post on LinkedIn. Right. And here's the thing on Twitter.
That is so interesting.
It's very interesting. The thing is, remember, guys, you can't edit a tweet. We've been trying to get Twitter to enable us to do this, but this is in the Twitter record, right? So this word, and tell me if you guys agree, and then from the audience, please comment. Is anyone else also offended by this? I think it ruined the post. And at first, I didn't notice it. And then I read the post. I was saying to the panel earlier, I was like, something rubs me the wrong way about this. And then I realized what it was. And it was, in fact, that dominant was really bothering me about this. I never want to be called dominant. I've had to fight for everything. And because I'm a strong woman, or I'm assertive, or whatever it is you want to associate with me, I'm not dominant. And I know, okay, so I'm seeing in the chat, and I want to hear from you guys. So Katie, I know, and Shari also didn't have a negative connotation associated with the word dominant. To me, it rubbed me the wrong way. And I think in this instance, when he says, let's not punish dominant women, I don't know, it strikes me as negative. So what's everyone's thoughts on this? And does it bother you like it bothered me?
I didn't like the combination of dominant with the word violating. Those are both really strong words to me. And when I had that same reaction, Stefanie, that I was like, something's up with this sentence that's just bugging me. And I think it was that combination. But then, as we started talking about it amongst our group, I thought it was interesting, sort of the linguistic background of the word dominant. And that it's not necessarily meant to be a negative word, that it's being perceived as a negative word. So I find it very intriguing that he took it out of his LinkedIn post, because clearly somebody must have said something, or it must have caused some kind of backlash by using that word.
Yeah, clearly.
It's because if you say a man is dominant, it's usually going to be a negative thing, right? So what happens is that it's societal pressure and expectation of us. I mean, they did a study where they took a newborn, dressed the baby up in blue, had adults play with it, then said, describe this baby to us. They said, this baby's bright, willful, strong. Took the same baby, dressed the baby in pink, had the adults play with it, describe this baby, soft, weak, fragile. It was the same baby. It's just the expectations that society has. And so when men are direct and to the point, and they're assertive, then wow, everybody admires him. When a woman is direct, straightforward, and to the point, she's we all know we can fill it in. And so that's the point. And so when he put dominant women, it's the women who are assertive, but he's using that, they're different from other women, so they're dominant.
Yeah.
And I didn't like it. I didn't like the combination. Assertive. I love badass. Laura, I thought that was great.
Yeah, badass.
I thought that was lovely.
That's strong. I love strong. And the other thing that bothered me was the whole idea of the liked less, right? Like, I didn't realize that being liked was now a determination of my success. And I didn't really also think that, like, it didn't really, to me, seem like men care about being liked, or that's going to make a difference in whether I'm successful, or that would even be in the same sentence with a man's being successful. So,
although, Steph, I have found, I've done a lot of work with helping to train people to do pitches. And what one of my colleagues that I work with does a lot of GC panels, and a lot of GCs say that if all things are the same, like all criteria are the same and credibility is the same, they will hire the person they like versus the person they don't like. So I do think that happens, but I think that happens across the board. I don't think it's just a male or a female kind of thing.
I want to bring up a point because I think there's a corollary between this issue and like the voice inflection issue as well. And this is a concept that I practice in my business that I think has been one of the most significant contributing factors to my success is the concept of constraining what you focus on. And if as an entrepreneur, you're focusing on the wording used in Adam Grant's text or tweet, or you're focusing on how people perceive the tone of your voice, you're not thinking about your business. And like, is this something for a debate? Sure. But I think like it's really easy for people to veer off course instead of focusing on what is in their control. We can't control what Adam Grant tweets into the universe. And like, does it affect your bottom line? Probably no. So I think like, rather than worrying about how people perceive the tone of your voice or worrying about things like this is an exercise and a skill to build of being like, Adam Grant, say whatever you want. I'm going after my Q3 goals. And it's really easy to get caught up in this world of social media, but like as an entrepreneur, you have to be able to be like, yep, that's not for me. That's not my cross to bear. That's not the thing that I'm going to get held up on because I have stuff that I need to go on and accomplish. And this is outside of my like zone of genius or my focus. And it doesn't ultimately contribute to my goals. So I think it's easy to get caught up in stuff like this. I don't think it matters in terms of your journey as an entrepreneur.
I definitely agree with you. I think that it's just an interesting point about an inflection point, also just about where we are, maybe what people think, and just in general about, some of the headway that we've made in terms of gender equality. It was just meant to be a discussion point. And I don't think, again, that this should take us away from like, who we are as in our business. And I want to get into the nitty gritty today. It was just, so timely. So I thought we could talk about it, especially, there's so much going on. There are things we could talk about like Simone Biles and, things today, but I want to get into being an entrepreneur. And listen, there are things that we could be offended about every single day. I will tell you that we are talking about Adam, which is good for his brand. And if it also enables us to spark a conversation, that is good for everybody, right? I mean, truly, he's obviously an advocate for lots of really good things. And we are learning. It's a teaching moment and all of those things. And I agree, we can be offended by everything in the world. So I definitely think that there's a lot we can learn from each other. I did think this was funny. This was in the Twitter universe with the Adams post. And this was just like, I thought this was guidance about how women can get promoted from years ago, non-threatening versus threatening. Sherine, I thought you would find this actually quite amusing, knowing what I know about you, like how to get a promotion and be threatening versus non-threatening. And Deb Scaringi, I also thought you might find this amusing, like how women can, like how you can ask for a promotion. So
it makes me just howl. It's crazy that this was even real.
Yeah,
the graphics look like they're from the 1950s.
Well,
exactly. Well, the whole text does, yeah.
Yeah.
Guys, this is just meant to be given a chuckle and let's move on, but I had to put this in here. Look at the text. Have your coworker, well, even though you really don't want it, this will make it really more likely that you will actually get the promotion.
Oh my gosh, this is like a 1950s Cosmo.
Yes.
Yeah.
Have books around so he thinks that you're interesting.
Oh my God.
Threatening versus
Sherine, that's so
woman.
true.
The woman being direct versus non-direct. So let's get a chuckle out of that and let's get into the conversation. Okay. So let's talk about some real things. Like we had brought up fear as a big topic about in general. And I know, Shari, that was something you had talked about quite a bit as something we could discuss today. So I wanted to get into that. I think we were all super scared. I started my business in the pandemic, just like you did right before the pandemic. And this was not something I thought I would do longer term. And it is turning into that. I don't necessarily think everyone has to have like a grand scheme plan for the rest of their lives. I think a lot of our careers are going to pivot. And you should be open to lots of those things. But tell us about how fear has been a motivator. And I would like anyone here to talk about fear as a motivator. For me, means like I support myself. I'm single, and if anyone wants to set me up, I'm looking. But I have to provide for myself, and so that is a motivator for me. So, Shari, tell us about fear.
Sure. I'm going to talk about fear, not so much from a motivational perspective, but, and actually this really will amplify Olivia's excellent point about let's talk about being entrepreneurs and let's not worry about what this one's saying or that one's saying. And that really played into something that I feared greatly. I'm Gen X, I'm almost 50 years old, and my big fear was I am a tech dinosaur. I am a tech dinosaur. I've obviously upped my tech game since the pandemic, but I had the limiting beliefs that I can't start a business. I don't know how to do a website. How am I going to do webinars? Like, how am I going to do this electronic billing? And I was getting so limited by these fears. And what I didn't realize, and this kind of goes back to something Olivia was saying, is we have to capitalize on our strengths. Once I started realizing my strengths, and I know my strengths, they're marketing, they're business development, public speaking, dealing with people, crunching my numbers. These are all my strengths, and there's a lot of them, and they're important. And I realized, capitalize on my strengths. I can outsource my weaknesses. I made one phone call and had someone set up my website. So really all of the things I was fearing, I was able to delegate. Now I give myself a baseline type of knowledge. I think it's good for entrepreneurs to kind of know every step of your business. I mean, I'm not going to turn into an accountant, bookkeeper overnight, but I like to know how things are set up, where things are, but who I'm delegating that to, because that is not my strength. And I want to concentrate on my strengths. People have said to me, oh, get a virtual assistant and they'll answer your posts on LinkedIn. I'm like, are you kidding? LinkedIn's my whole business. That's my whole game. That's my strength. I want to concentrate on that. So kind of hearkening back to what Olivia said, like, don't worry about where people are trying to make you feel weak, whether it's the inflection of your voice or, my hair is like all over the place and is not like quote unquote professional. Just take your strengths, capitalize on them, and you can really build something unique to you. And if you have a weakness, you'll learn it or you'll outsource it. And really, most of the time it pays to outsource it when you can afford to do that. So that's a little bit about my fear. I had serious tech fears, and I was able to conquer them by really outsourcing a lot of them and then learning some of the easier things.
Yeah, and I think, okay, all of that makes sense. Like, and Deb, you brought up some points, like, so, and I'm still learning about this. Like, I had to get a lawyer and a really good accountant. I'm still figuring out the accounting stuff. Like you said, you had to put away a certain amount. I had to do estimated taxes. Like,
yep.
It's that all of that was very scary for me, and like an area that I don't know. I am not a finance person. In fact, you do not want to do anything related
me either.
For you who know me, know that is a very bad thing. Like, one of my clients I was working with, I was trying to do percentages, and they were like, no, this is bad. Like, I'm a writer, I'm a content person. Yep. I am not.
But I do think, Stefanie, I think one of the things that, I mean, you mentioned that because, starting a business is very daunting and you don't know everything. And, we've been in business for 15 years. And in that time, we started out, doing like 60% print, and that was sort of my baby. I understood that. And then, digital, obviously print is maybe 10%, 15% maybe. But a lot of that with fear is understanding that you are a smart person and you can learn these things. Right. When you say I'm not a finance person, I used to say I'm not a writer. And then I learned to write, and I think like you also, I'm not saying that, you're wrong, but I think also you have to realize that it's not the people on the Twitterverse. It's not people out there. It's your own self. Your own self is so critical saying, you can't do that. You're not like that. I'm not that kind of a person.
No, you're right. I
But
probably.
you find out that you can be, and you're like, wow, that's really, I think the hardest part is to have faith in yourself sometimes and to have a network of people. I mean, I was lucky enough to have a partner to sort of like say, no, we can do that. We can do that. You can do that. And what that is you push your you push your aspirations, you push your goals. You're always pushing forward and saying, wow, that's really interesting. That would be so cool to do. And just say, well, why can't I do that? At the same point, taking the point of focusing on your strengths, you can't say, I'm going to do everything. You have to say, what am I good at? I mean, I'm not going to turn around and say, I'm going to be an accountant. I mean, I'm a creative person. I can try to do that, but the energy that it takes me to learn that should be better spent doing something else.
I
Yeah,
think
see,
that's
I
right.
think it's
Understanding when you delegate, when you don't delegate. It's really kind of figuring out your strengths, and your strengths aren't finite. They can change. You can look at, 5 years from now going, I'm a stronger writer. I'm a stronger business person.
Yep.
And you're right. Like some of that stuff is fear. And so Deb McMurray, you just put in the chat, fear comes in two colors, rational and irrational. Unpack that first and then use your rational fears to motivate you. And then your irrational fears can paralyze you. Can you expand upon this insight, please?
Yes. I think we tend to, because we shortcut everything today. That's what social media has taught us. And what we do is we tend to think that all fears are equal. And whether it was when I was starting the company, like Charlyne and I started our companies pretty much exactly at the same time. Yeah, we're exactly the same age. And but there are fears all along over the past 15 years. I mean, we had a recession to go through, and we had countless other all kinds of things to go through. But rational fears are things like no time, no money, no ideas, no capability. Like Shari was talking about her, fear of tech. That's something that is, once you actually recognize it, you can fix it. You can find a strategy for it. But irrational fears, social anxiety, fear of failure, fear of success, all of those are irrational fears that can be so paralyzing that if you don't understand that, really be so clear about this is an irrational fear, I can actually never deal with this without perhaps therapy. Just set it aside over here and really focus on the ones that you can actually use to motivate you and identify a specific problem that you can actually solve. And it's so empowering to actually tackle one of those fears that you think, whether it's, let's say you wake up one day and you think, oh my gosh, I have got to get this report done, but I don't have any ideas today. It's like, they're still on the pillow. I have not found the ideas for today. If you have something like that, there are ways to work within, within that and figure that out.
I coach women on their fear, especially entrepreneurs, on their fear of failure. And one of the things that I always explain to people is that failure is always a thought. It's never a circumstance. So you have to describe a set of facts as a failure, and that's always optional. But more than that, failure is only something that you can start to entertain when you start to entertain the idea of quitting, because failure requires an end point from which you measure. And if you take quitting off the table entirely and you just decide, I'm never going to quit this, I'm just going to stick with it until I figure it out, then you really slip into the possibility where you're always just winning or learning, and you completely eliminate that fear. I completely agree with Deb that it is an irrational fear, but if you just commit, that's been one of the most powerful decisions that I made really early on in my business. I was like, I'm just never going to quit this. I'm going to be bad at it for as long as it takes to be bad at it, until I figure out how to sell, until I figure out how to market effectively. And I was willing to, I just took quitting off the table entirely. I really love what Charlyne said about make sure you're identifying those negative thoughts or negative descriptions of yourself, things you're bad at, whether it's writing or finances. Those are all thoughts too. I'm going to challenge Charlyne on one. She said starting a business is daunting. I don't think that at all. I don't think starting my business was daunting. I think that's an opinion. If that's a thought that anyone in the audience has, if that thought's holding you back, decide what you can choose to think instead of thinking that it'll be daunting. It doesn't have to be.
I do have to follow that up, because once my partner and I did start the business, the thought that crossed our mind was, wow, this is easy.
Yeah,
wow.
Exactly.
I can't believe how easy this was. You know? And then the recession hit, but that, you know, but that, you know.
Yeah, I think it's easier than you think it is.
Yes, I think we were sort of, you know, it became sort of a mind thing. And you're like, wait, why was I so scared of this? And I think the other thing is perfection really gets in your way. And I understand that that is a problem of mine. It's also a strength of mine. I want everything perfect. But the thing is that really demotivates you. What is the saying? Like, perfection is the enemy of getting things done.
Good.
Yes. And so that really is something you have to fight against as an entrepreneur. Just get it done. Just do it, you know.
Yeah, and something else, something about good is good enough, right? We have to stop, like, you know, perfection will like really be our worst enemy. And if we sit and we just tinker with things and we, you know, we can't give everything 100%. Something's got to give. So I just say to myself, good is good enough. And then I need to move on to the next thing. And
done is better than perfect.
Yes, it is. Yeah. Done is better than perfect.
Yes, something else I wanted to add on the fear conversation. I remember when I first started consulting, I went and had lunch with a friend of mine who was really, in my mind, a very successful consultant. And he and I sat at lunch and he's like, well, what's holding you back? Why don't you just do it? And I said, I am so afraid I'm not going to have business. I'm not going to have work. Yeah, and he was like, that fear alone will ensure that you have work, because you're going to be driven to find ways to get work. And so if anybody listening to this, you know, conversation now has that fear, that was the one thing that just pushed me in the direction that I needed to go in, is that, you know what, use that fear as the fuel to, you know, work through it and to figure it out. And he's right. I have, knock on wood, consistently had amazing work. And I love that, but I still, to this day, I go, oh my God, I'm a little slow right now. I'm freaking out. And I'm like, stop, one breath at a time. With enough time and resources, you can figure anything out. And if you don't have those financial resources, then turn to your colleagues, turn to your friends, turn to people who you admire and ask them, how do you do it?
It's true.
And learn from those experiences.
Can I ask you guys how you deal with a setback or a failure or making a mistake? Like, I am someone who beats myself up over it, but then eventually I'm like, okay, like I've worked for some really terrible women, and then I've worked for an amazing woman at 5 different places, and she's my mentor. Many of you know, her name is Wendy Bernaro. She's the most amazing woman who saw something very special in me at a time when I didn't. And I'm very lucky to have had her. She's the global CMO of Baker McKenzie right now. She made me do things I never thought I could, right? And she would tell me every day when I make a mistake, she would say, did anyone die? And I said, no. And she's like, we're not in the business of saving lives. And she's like, we're in the business of helping lawyers make more money. And I said, well, that helps put it in perspective, right? Some lawyers would say things to me that were very terrible. And I would say to myself, did anyone die today? And I'm like, well, I might die, perhaps, but did anyone die? And I always kept that in the back of my head. I beat myself up constantly over making a mistake, not getting the things done. I could have done this. Maybe what if I did this? I wrote an article recently about the sliding doors concept. What if I had taken this job? What if I had not messed up X? My life would be different. Are you guys as neurotic as I am? Or do you guys just say, all right, whatever, that happened, wasn't meant to be. If you make a mistake, what do you do? If you don't do 100, how do you guys deal with failures and mistakes? That's my long-winded way of asking that question.
Actually, this sounds weird, but I prefer the process that happens after making a mistake instead of a win. Like, to compare it to trial work, if you win a trial, you're like, pat on the back, move on. Like, you don't dissect it or post game it as much. But when you lose, you're like examining every single little thing and going back through your emails and like, what did I? So I like the process because I think that enables you actually to get better. And I think changing your mindset around Like, can you change your mindset around it? Like, it's not a failure. It's just a stepping stone to success, you know, like those little mind tricks you can play. But I always look at it kind of like with a childlike curiosity. And I always say, what did we learn? Like, and I say that to my daughter when she microwaved a s'more and like almost blew up our microwave yesterday and like almost started a fire. It's like, what did we learn? You know, what do we do differently next time? And we make mistakes a lot, but to your point, Stefanie, it's like, did anybody die, or like you going to be homeless? You know, that's an Angie Lee quote. She's like, are you going to die or be homeless? And if not, then proceed. So.
Well, and there are many different kinds of mistakes that you can make. And some are high value, big whopping mistakes. And some are small mistakes that can lead to a big problem. You have the wrong pricing. You hire the wrong people in the wrong job, and you know, other problems ripple from that. I've been in business a long time, and during that time, we've had customers that became competitors. We had customers that stole from us. We had customers that, so there's been several, and of course the recession and then the pandemic and all of that, but there have been points where I couldn't sleep at night, worried what was going to happen, what we could do, what we just laying, you know, just in a sweat almost. And I read an article by a pretty big CEO that said, if you're the CEO of a company and you can't sleep at night, then you're doing something wrong. And
I hate those articles.
I'm totally doing it right then, because I haven't slept in the last year and a half. But then I realized over time, you know, it's the fear can eat away at everything, and you really have to put a plug in it. And now when I can't sleep or something's gnawing my, is there anything I can do about that right now? No, there's nothing I can do at 1 o'clock in the morning about this problem. We'll deal with that.
Like
it's the, you know, Scarlett O'Hara thing, but it's
another
true.
day.
Fear paralyzes. You can't solve your problems because you can't think beyond the fear. You have to be able to put it aside, and you have to pivot. Number one thing you have to do in this world as a person and as an entrepreneur is pivot. Change what you're doing. If something's not working, you change it. You made a mistake, you pivot. You do the opposite. You do this. You just have to be able to be flexible to move, but fear keeps you from doing anything. Yeah.
What would you say would be your greatest lesson that you've learned so far, or biggest challenge that you've experienced so far?
You know, I was going to say something very about fear. There's something that both Laura and Olivia said the last time we got together. They said, you know what? I knew that I was going to be successful. You know, I was the opposite. I didn't think I was. I didn't think I was going to. I didn't think I could do it. And then that's one of the reasons why I always say you've got to be inspired by what other people do, because their journey's been finished. So I was moving into a different area, and I was still thinking, I don't have any networks. You know, am I going to be able to do this? And I was watching a documentary called Jews, Hollywood, and the American Dream. It's all about the start of the movie industry. These were all Jewish immigrants who were clothiers, they were glove makers, tailors, but they saw a vision. They had a vision. They knew that they could partner together. And then they knew that this was something that was going to make it big. And then they said, okay, now let's find someone who knows how to make movies. And I thought, oh my God, these are titans of industry that started a whole industry, and they didn't know how to make movies. So why am I thinking that if I'm going to move in this new path that I won't be able to do it? And that's why it was so important. So that's one of my biggest mistakes, is allowing that fear to paralyze me and not realizing that I would be able to figure it out, or I could find someone who knows how to make movies.
And that's what Laura said last time. Remember, you said there was no doubt that you could find someone who could help you do whatever it is that you needed to do or ask questions. And so I thought that was inspiring as well. And I've taken that to heart. You know, there's always someone who can help you figure it out. And a lot of people, like I see Katie, you put a quote from Sarah Blakely in the chat, and I love following her and hearing about it, because I'm like, always like, you know, you hear these people like Sarah Blakely and like even Bethany Frankel, frankly, who like, you know, started a skinny, like there are these ideas and you're like, how would I find a factory to make a cocktail or to make like an undergarment like this. Like I always come up with these ideas and then I'm like, how would I get a patent to do that? Or how would I find out or whatever? Like, I mean, I'm helping lawyers make more money and build their brands. Like it's a very different thing. But what if I actually had an idea for a product? And there are some people in our industry who do have products. I mean, Laura has products. There, you know, I'll give that Adrian Dayton took social media and then created Clearview Social and created a product. There are people who do that. So, you know, that's an interesting thing. Like I would have no idea how to do that. And Deb Scaringi, you said, let's provide some actionable tips to the audience. And I want to do that. So let's talk about that. What would be some of your actionable tips if you were today going to become an entrepreneur? Say, I'm going to leave my job and I am going to become an entrepreneur. What would you say would be the steps that you would recommend that people do? And I would like each of you to answer this question. And it could be an entrepreneur. You could say, I'm going to product to answer it however you want to answer it. What would you do? What would you tell people to do?
Well, one of the practical steps that I took that I didn't really realize that it was a good one until I did it because it helped me so much was I sent out an email at the time and I asked people for their one piece of advice. If I were to start my own business, what would you do differently if you had to start your own business? And I got amazing things. And I mean, one of the best, you know, piece of advice, well, a couple. One of them was just understand how to build, how to value yourself, right? What is the cost? And that is probably for me, one of the hardest things was pricing, right? And
Yeah,
I made a bit, and it's actually harkens back to your last question. My biggest mistake was I way undervalued my first gig. I was like making practically nothing. I was like, what was I thinking? But that was because I didn't know that I need to escrow 30%, almost actually more than that, 40% of my income to cover my taxes. I had no idea that Social Security taxes were 14% of my pay, right? I didn't know any of that stuff. So I went and I learned that from other people who have done it. So find your network, find out who they are, pick a few people. It's like targeting for business development. Figure out who the people are that have that, you know, success level or that you admire, or that you think is doing really well, or has a successful product or service, and talk to them and just mine those little nuggets from the people you already know in your network, because they have a vested interest in you being successful most often anyway, at least you hope. And I think there's so much you can learn from the people who have done it before you. And so you just have to not be afraid to ask them those questions. Be very direct about it. And if they don't want to tell you the answer, they're not going to tell you. So you move on, you ask a question to someone else, right? Mm-hmm. So just ask for what you need. And that would, for me, it was understanding how to build something so that I wasn't working for peanuts. And I've worked on that over the years. It's better.
I love that. Yeah. For me, I didn't even know that this was happening necessarily, but I built my brand on social and other ways, speaking, long before I ever thought I was going to be starting a business. So those of you who are in-house, in other roles, and wondering, why should I be posting on social? Why should I be speaking? Why should I be writing? Because you never know where you may wind up. You may want to start your own business. So when I was going off doing this, it wasn't such a random thing that Stefanie Marrone, like now, was a consultant, because I had laid the foundation without even realizing that I was stepping into this role. It was a natural progression. And I had an email marketing list already. I had been collecting emails from people who had said to me, if you ever do this, or if you ever publish an email newsletter, I would love to be part of that. So I had a foundation for that before I started. So I didn't have to waste any time.
My best advice, and it's kind of piggybacking on yours, Stefanie, because I also built a brand before I built a business, is really 3 steps. You have to know your market. My market was insurance companies. I was a lawyer at an insurance company for many years, so I knew my market intimately. know their problems. I know their problems. I worked there. I had their problems, and know how to solve their problems and tell them how you're going to solve their problems. And that's when I went out on social media and would post every day about a different problem they had or a different aspect of it. And I would give them value, not just, hey, I got this award or got that award, or I'm speaking here and speaking there. And I do a bit of that, but I would tell them, if you have a witness that is difficult because of X, Y, and Z, this is how you want to prepare them for their deposition. If you have a trial and ABC are your issues, this is how you want to approach your direct examination. Then I'd add like a little flash in my song lyrics and like some cool pictures and stuff like that. And I would just give them all my knowledge. And while I was doing this, I created a product. It's called Encyclopedia. I didn't know anything about selling a product. I didn't know anything about creating a product, but I knew about teaching. I knew about how to teach litigators psychology to up their trial game. So I contacted this guy. I call him the millennial. I don't even always remember what his name is. He's just the millennial to me. He won't even talk to me on the phone. We have to talk through a computer or text. And I knew he was great at setting up these courses. He did all the setup. He did all of that. All I have to do is teach my lessons, keep them interesting, write my lessons, and from there, and then market my product. So I was able to go back and capitalize on my strengths. He's dealing with my tech weaknesses and, setting up courses and using Thinkific and doing all of that. But my real takeaway is give value every single day to your audience, because then when they need someone they're not going to be able to prep that witness just from a bunch of my posts. And if they are, that's fantastic. I'm happy that they are. They're going to call me, and they do. So give value, confront the problems that you know that the market's having, and really just tell them how you're going to solve it. So those are my takeaways.
Yes, amen to all of those things. And never, I agree, Shari, I will go 3 steps ahead. People do I agree with you, they like to celebrate your successes. So if you win an award, named X, blah, 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 post it every now and then. People like to celebrate your successes, but that should be very far and few of your posts. Your post should be about giving value, giving information, content that is useful. It should not be about vote for me and my firm as the top PR firm of the year, or I recently won this award, blah, blah, blah. Those are not good posts. It should be about what you're giving people. So you're 100% right. And you never do that. So that's great. By the way, I will be saving this chat and turning this into an article, including all the amazing comments from Jamie and a bunch of the other, Melanie, and all the attendees. All your insights are amazing. So I want to make sure you guys are included in this. So Jen Klyse, what advice would you give to people? You worked at a big, big, big mothership company, and that had to be scary to leave and start your own business. So what actionable takeaways are you going to give people?
I think the biggest thing I would say, and there's all sorts of documentation out there about fail fast and things like that. But one of the things that I would say is, don't be afraid if your first attempt at doing something different turns out to be your, oh my gosh, there's a term, a boyfriend when you've just broken up with someone.
Rebound.
Thank you. Rebound. Don't be afraid if it turns out to be your rebound job. And so a woman that I've been working with for years had said that to me, because when I left the big mothership, I made a choice to do something different, and it did not work at all. But what I did like about it was that it showed me what I didn't want to do. It helped me clarify what I actually wanted to do, which was consult. My sister will say that, you know, a job where I go around telling people what to do is kind of made for me.
I'm going to agree with her on that. Knowing you.
But that's what I wanted to do. I didn't want to sell. I didn't want to have to focus on some of these other things, and give yourself the opportunity to recognize that, and then face, you know, there's fears. I have a ton of those. I could talk for 2 hours about the stuff that I went through before I started this business. But I explained to a friend's daughter once, I said, do you know what bravery is? And she said, it was being willing to do something that's difficult. And I said, no. I said, bravery isn't about not having the fear. Bravery is about moving forward despite the fear. Because people who don't have any fears when they're coming into a scenario like this are either very, very few and far between, or they're completely deluded. So don't take that as oh, I can't do this. Just take it as I'm going to be brave, and I'm going to try, and I'm going to have a rebound job. It wasn't a term I had ever used, but the first time I heard it, I was like, oh, yes, that's what that was. Great learning experience, no hard feelings, but yeah, no, this is just not what I want. And that was what my path looked like, and that's what I tell people to be open to as they move forward.
I agree with you. And by the way, I will tell you guys, I put this in the chat, but I wasn't sure what I wanted to do, and I kept getting job offers and interviewing, and I took a job as a CMO at a law firm, and I hated it. And I took it for 3 weeks, and I didn't really tell people I took the job. I didn't stop consulting. Don't change LinkedIn until you're really sure about something. Give it a month, and because you're going to confuse people. So, and don't give up your consulting assignments. Don't tell anyone until you're really sure if something's working out for you. To Jen's point, you don't need to broadcast everything to the world. Make sure you really like something. I love that advice, and I really do think that you're right. You can have like a rebound job, boyfriend, whatever, girlfriend, whatever it is. Katie, I find you very inspiring for a lot of reasons. One is that you were working at a big firm and you were an associate and you just didn't want to go to the office anymore, and you started your own practice. And by all means, you know, by all accounts, you're pretty young to start your own business and start your own practice. And you did it. You have employees, and then you have a product also. So give us your actionable takeaways for how someone can do it as well. And you work from home, you're the breadwinner, yada, yada, yada. Like, what do you have for people who want to do what you do?
I'm dominant, apparently. I have a
Yeah.
low.
So I'm going to put in the chat. I'm also going to do it. I think I'm going to write it in all caps, just like I've done it, because I think the word dominant is even more powerful when you put it in all caps. And I'm also going to say it in a low pitched voice, or as low pitched as I possibly can for me.
I'm sorry.
Did that work?
I deal with things with laughter, and sometimes it's not appropriate. My mom would tell me. So with, okay, tips, actionable tips, small bites. You do not, how do you eat an elephant? One bite at a time. So like, I think it's people get overwhelmed and they're like, oh, it's just going to be too big of a task. It took me a year to start my law firm on the nights, on the weekends, like while I was working at another firm. And it was painful. Like to Olivia's point, it is easy. Like once I got on the other side, I was like, oh my God, it's so much easier running this business than it is being in somebody else's system. But it did take, logistics and time and all that. So I would just say, how do you get out of your head? You get out of your head with action, and you do it with like small bites. Like I would do maybe like an hour at a time and then take a break, and I do that with my writing too. Every Sunday I write for 30 minutes, and then sometimes it snowballs, right? Because you're kind of tricking your brain into like, oh, I'll just dip my toe in the water. And then before you know it, you're like swimming in the deep end. So that's a good tip. I would also say focusing on less things, and Olivia was hitting on this as well, like to the point of essentialism. There's a really good book that I always recommend called Essentialism by Greg McKeown. Focusing on one thing at a time. I think at one point I had like started a podcast and I was doing private coaching and I wanted to start a membership and I wanted this and I wanted that. And it was just too much. And so I started focusing on one big project at a time over 2 quarters. So the first part of this year, Q1, Q2, I did a membership. Now Q3, Q4, I'm working on a book. And you can move the needle faster by, you know, just having that laser focus. So when a lot of people are like, oh, you need to join Clubhouse. I'm like, that sounds great. I'll look at that next year. Oh, you need to get on Twitter. That sounds great. I'll look at that next year. Like those projects get, you know, relegated to the future. And when you're doing a lot of this type of marketing, you get inundated with like LinkedIn, like, hey, will you come talk to my middle school class about like career advancement? Like somebody actually asked me for this summer and I was like, oh, that sounds so sweet. Would love to, but I'm working on a book project right now. Can I talk to you next year? And I got like a snarky response. It was like, oh, it's not going to take that much time. And you know, it's like, you just have to be like the gatekeeper to your schedule and really value like what you're working on. Because if you don't, like you just get steamrolled by administrative tasks and people.
Oh yeah, someone just said you have to learn to say no. No is not a bad word, by the way. I overcommit myself all the time and I'm not doing that anymore. I had 3 speaking engagements in one day. I'm not doing that anymore, Katie. I agree with you. And if it doesn't make sense for your business, don't do it. Also, we should be getting paid for speaking. I'm sort of against like free speaking engagements, and that's something I'm feel very strong about, but in certain cases.
Except this one. Except this one.
Well, except this one, of course. This is a free thing. Ignore what I just said. Back to Katie. Yes, and no is, someone wrote here, no is a complete sentence. Yes, and it's essential for self-care. Yeah.
Not everyone is your customer. That took me a really long time to learn that from a sales standpoint. When somebody wants to maybe engage you in a discussion and like learn more about your business, that doesn't necessarily mean that they're your ideal customer. And that is a decision that you need to make as well. Just because somebody is coming to you and trying to engage you for something, that does not mean that they're your ideal client. And learning, it's always this like delicate balance between, we're entrepreneurs, we want to like take on maybe something a little bit new. And like, I'll put it in the context of legal services. I do employment law. I like to do separation of employment, both sides, employer, employee. Somebody will come to me and they'll be like, hey, I have like an ERISA issue. Nope. You know, it's like, you have to know when to say no. And it kind of all comes back to that, but you need to be very careful about just screening customers, because I think the biggest like secret to my growth is saying no to people that come to me as opposed to taking them on, because the ones that are the most high maintenance, they end up just dragging you down. Like, I mean, it can be a nightmare having a bad client. So I would really encourage you to like value yourself, know what your worth is, and know that your hourly rate is not the amount of time you're spending. It's all of your experience that you bring to the table. So like if somebody comes to you and they're like, you know, Stefanie, your rate is so high, why you're charging, you know, whatever, throw out a number, $500 an hour for consulting. It's like, well, you know, I have X number of years of experience. You know, you have a resume that goes into that rate. It's not just the number of minutes that you're putting into something.
I could not agree with you more. I love all of those. I love all of those tips. Does anyone want to add any actionable tips, any thoughts? Deb McMurray, Olivia, yeah, I mean, Olivia, your story's pretty, I mean, I love it. You transformed your life from a practicing attorney into a coach, and you did not have another job. So I love that. I love
Yeah, I think that I made 2 decisions really early on. When I left my last job, I decided I would not quit. And I decided I was going to go all in on myself, no matter how unglamorous it was in the beginning. And it was really unglamorous. I sold a lot of my stuff to not have to take another legal job. I paid my mortgage 1 month from Tiffany jewelry that I sold, and I could not be more proud and excited that I had stuff that I could sell in order to be able to do that. It was rocky at first, but I'm really glad that that was my journey, and I geek out over my story. Things that I did that are actionable steps. Number one, never talk to people who haven't done what you've done. Put all of them on mute. They have no opinions that will serve you. So just whether it's family members, friends, if they haven't already created what you're about to go create, do not ask them questions. Don't run things by them. Don't seek feedback. Ignore them. Number two, find an expert who has done what you're about to do. So I like Deb's point. I constrained to one person because I didn't want to have to deal with like competing theories of success. So I have a business coach. Her name's Stacey Bayman. For anyone listening, her podcast is incredible. Stacey with an EY, last name Boehman. Sherry's really familiar with her. She knows I talk about Stacey all the time. Really easy implementable concepts that I learned from her. There are 4 steps to meeting people. She says 3, but I think adding value is really part of that. So number 1, meet people. This is how you grow a business. Meet people, tell them what you do, add value ahead of time, lots of it, never too much, for free, make offers. And I want to talk about this offer standpoint because I see so many people make this mistake on LinkedIn, is that they post valuable content. They're really consistent. They are definitely position themselves as an expert in their field. You know, they know their stuff, but they never make an offer. And we want to reduce friction as much as possible. So, and I want to know that I'm your person. So I'm a life coach to lawyers, right? So if you're a lawyer and you're thinking about hiring a coach, you can see my business and you're like, oh, Olivia's my person. I know attorneys out there and I'm like, oh, I know that you're in this. I know you do family law, but like, do you help divorced dads get full custody or get, equal custody? I want to know that that's what you do. So really identifying yourself as specific for what your offer is and know your offer. Stacey has a concept that I've used in my own business. It's a simple offer. I have one offer. I coach people one-on-one for 6 months. That's the only thing I sell. Everything else I do is free value that leads into that one simple offer. So I have a funnel. I want people to know what their funnel is and how you get to each step. So I have 2. One's either a LinkedIn post to a consult with me to working with me for 6 months. My second funnel is a LinkedIn post to a free webinar. I do a monthly webinar series at the last day of the month, every month. At the end of my webinar, I make an offer for a consult. And then if you book a consult, you're going to get an offer to work with me for 6 months. My business is so streamlined that I know every time I'm giving value, I know where it fits in my funnel. I know that I'm making a free offer to sign up for a webinar. And at the webinar, I'm making a free offer for a free consult. And at the consult, I'm making a paid offer to work with me one-on-one. I'm always making offers. Don't worry about feeling salesy. Everything we've ever bought in our lives is because someone made an offer for something, right? So the people that are desperate to get the results that you offer are waiting for you to make an offer. So know your simple offer and make them. My advice.
I love that. And Laura, let's close out with you. I saw you put something in here about your advice about step-by-step, put one foot in front of the other. Can you just expand on it? I love your advice.
I totally agree. I think I mentioned it the last time. Before you get started, don't look at the mountain. You're just taking one step at a time, and that's how you climb the mountain. But once you're there and once you've started your business, don't be afraid to think big. As a matter of fact, you're going to help yourself out if you do think big. There are many things I would have done differently had I known where it was going to lead in the end. And if we'd made some changes in the beginning, it would have made some of it so much easier. So think big, think of a bigger picture. Where could this go? And my other thing to really keep in mind is when you are feeling business pressures, whether it's competition or what's going on in the world, just focus on what you do and what you can do. Do it the best you can, and don't worry about the rest. Because if you are doing what you should be doing and you are focusing on making the best product, the best thing, it's all going to work out. If you let all those other things intrude, you can lose that focus. So just continue doing what you're doing and staying on point.
I love that. Don't focus on the noise. I love that. Oh, wow. What's that sign, Sherine?
I got 2 of those today.
I didn't get any signs. Like guys, I could talk to you for hours. This is amazing. And wow, there's another sign. So we may have
That one
to
was
do
for
this.
you. You are committed.
I
Goodbye.
am committed to this. We may have to do this again at another point. I really want you guys to be part of this community. I'm so thankful for all you for your time. Katie, thank you for saying yes to this when you say no to other things. Thank you guys for all saying yes, for being dominant females. We have a couple other great programs. We've got a women's CMO roundtable on August 11th, which is going to be great. We have 8 CMOs. August 16th, we've got Eva Wisnick with some tips on how to be more mindful in this crazy world. And I'm going to do a program on summer business development tips, even though summer is getting, it's not a Women Who Wow program, but you guys are welcome to come. And then we're going to do a back to school program in September on just kind of what we should be doing now that we're back in the fall on a bunch of different levels. So watch the record. I'll send out the recording. Melanie Lippman's program was really great about like fashion tips. Melanie's going to do a program for us in the fall. Sorry, again, about like just how do we dress now that we're like not only on Zoom, although we may be back on Zoom if this Delta thing doesn't get under control. Thank you all for joining. Great tips, great people here. I find you all amazing and inspiring and strong and dominant. So, let's all keep in touch, link in with each other. And thank you.
Thank you, Stephanie.
Thanks,